Boulder Dead by Matthew Arnold. Sending. So on the floor lay Boulder dead, and round their thickly strewn sword axes, darts, and spears, which all the gods in sport had idle thrown. And Boulder whom no weapon pierced or clove, but in his breast stood fixed the fatal bow of mistletoe, which look to ox or gave, the holder and unwitting holder threw. Gainst it alone had Balder's life no charm, and all the gods and all the heroes came and stood round Balder on the bloody floor, weeping and wailing, and Valhalla rang up to its golden roof with sobs and cries. And on the table stood the untasted meats, and in the horns and gold-rimmed skulls the wine. And now would night have fallen and found them yet, wailing, but otherwise was Odin's will, and thus the father of the Aegis spake. Enough of tears, ye gods, and joy of wail, not to lament, it was Valhalla's mate. If any here might weep for Baldur's death, I might weep his father, such a son. I lose today so bright, so loved a god, but he was met with doom which long ago the Nornis, when his mother bare him spun, and fate's seal, that souls end must be. Baldur is meet his death, and ye survive. Weep in an hour, but what can grief avail? For you yourself, ye gods, shall meet your doom. All you who hear me, and inhabit heaven, and I too, Odin too, the Lord of all. But ours we shall not meet, when the day comes, with woman's tears and we complaining cries. Why should we meet another's portion so? Wherever it fits you, having wept your honor, with cold dry eyes and hard capons and stern, to live as erst your daily life in heaven. By my shenanigans on the murder lock, the woe, the accuser whom, for gods, we hate, we strictly cared for, in the opportune day. Meanwhile, tomorrow, the morning dawns, bring word to the seashore, the Baldur ship. And on the deck, made high a funeral pyre, and on the top lay Baldur's corpse, and brought fire to the wood, and sent him out to sea, to burn, for wet is what the dead desire. So having spoke, the king of gods arose, and mounted his horse Sleipnir, whom he rode. And from the hall of heaven he rode away, through the Skiath, and sate upon his throne. The mount from whence his eyes survive the words, and far from heaven he turns his shining orbs, to look on Midgrave and the earth and man, and on the conrich lips he bent his gaze, mantlet reindeer pull over the snow, and on the fins the gentlest of mankind, fair men who live in houts under the ground. Nor did he look once more to Ida's plain, nor towards Valhalla and to sorrowing gods, who well he knew the gods what he his word, and ceased to mourn and think of Baldur's pie. But in Valhalla none the gods went back, from round Baldur all the heroes went, and left his body stripped upon the floor, and on the golden chairs they sate again, beside the tables in the hall of heaven, before each the cooks have served and placed new messes of the boar's sermon flesh, and Valkyries crowned their horns with meat. So away with pent up hearts and tearless eyes, wailing no more, in silence ate and drank, while twilight fell and sacred night come on. But the blind holder left the feast as gods, and Odin's hall, and ran through Asgard's streets, and paced for heaven where the gods have moored their ships, and through the gate beyond the wall, through sightless yet his own mind lead the god, down to the margin of the roaring sea. He came and settled along the sand, between the waves and black or hewn cliffs, went and out the screaming sea-fowl fly, and they came to where a galley breaks. Through the cliff wall and the fresh stream runs down, with a high moon behind it meets the sea. Where the glen Finzel stands, the house of Freya, honored mother of the gods, and shows its lighted windows to the main. There he went up and paced the door open, and in the hall he found those women old, the prophetesses, who by rate they turn on Freya's heart, feet high the sacred fire, both night and day, and by the inner wall, upon a golden chair, the mother sate, with folded hands, loyal things to come, drew holder near, and spake and said, Mother, what child of bale thou bearest in me, For fist forbears me with blinded eyes, sightless and helpless when you're weak in heaven. And afterward, of ignorant, witless mind, forbearst me and enforces soul, but I alone must take a branch from lock. The foe, the accuser, whom for gods we hate, and cast at the dear loved Border's breast, and whom the gods in sport or weapons threw. Gainst it alone I bore his life no charm, nor wherefore would I attempt, or thrive or fly, for will be my hateful sight in heaven. Can I, O mother, bring the Border back? Of her who knows the face and thinks aloud, can I with Hellas power a compact strike, and make exchange, and give my life for his? He spoke, the mother for gods replied, Hold thy ill-fated child of the fate, my son, sightless in soul and eye, what words are these? What one, long portion, with his doom of death, should change his loot and fill another's life, and tell a yield to this and let him go. On board the death have laid her hand, not we, nor doth she count his life a price for it. For many gods in heaven, and for alone, would freely die to purchase Borders back, and rid himself to Hellas' gloomy realm, for not so loathsome in what life in heaven. If gods and heroes lead in feast and fray, awaiting the darkness of the final times, if one should drudge its loose for beggar's sake, Border rejoice a bride so loved a god. But fate withstands, and laws forbid his way. Yet in my secret mind one way I know, nor do I judge if it shall win or fail. But much must still be tried, which should but fail. And the blind holder answered her and said, All the ways with Somawa, but who showst, is it a matter which a good might try? And straight to mother for gods replied, There is a way which leads to Hellas' realm untrodden, lonely, far from light and heaven. Goes through way must take no other horse to ride, but Sleipness only its horse alone. Nor must he choose with common path of God, which every day we come and go in heaven, over a bridge Bifrost, where his hindlights watch, past Midgard's forest, down to earth and man. But he must tread a dark untravelled road, which branches from the north of heaven, and ride 9 days, 9 nights, towards the northern ice. Through valleys deep engulfed with flowing streams, and you reach on the 10th morn a bridge, which spans with golden ashes Gila stream. Not Bifrost, but the bridge a damsel keeps, who tells the pacing troops of dead their way to the low shores of Ghost and Hellas' realm. And she will bide him northward steer his course, when he will journey through the lighted land, nor see the sun arise, nor see it set. And he must ever watch the northern bear, who from a frozen haze with jealous eyes confronts the dog and hunter in the south. It is alone not dipped in Ocean's stream, and straight he will come down to Ocean's strand. Ocean, whose water ring enfolds the world, and on whose march lands guide and dread. And we reach its unknown northern shore, far, far beyond the outmost giant's home, and the shingled fields of ice, the waste of snow, and he will fare across the dismal ice northward, until he meets a strengthening wall, bearing us away, and the wall great. But when he must dismount, and on the ice tighten the girths of snipers, Odin's horse, and make him leap the grate, it came with him, and he would see strength round him Hellas' realm, the plains of Nephi, where dwell the dead, and hear the rowing of streams of hell, and he would see the vanished shadow tribes, and Balder set him thrown in Hellas' throne, when he must not regard the wrathful ghost, all will flit like ebbing leaves. Around but he must trade across the solemn queen, and pay her homage and enter her prayers, telling her all the grief they have in heaven. For Balder, whom she holds by right below, if heavily he may melt her heart with words, and make her yield and give him Balder back. She spoke, but Balder answered her and said, Mother, all different ways was most chosen, no journey for a sightless god to go. And straight to mother for gods replied, Wherefore where should say not go, my son? But he whom first thou meets, when thou comes to Asgard, and declares his hidden way, shall go, and I will be his guide unseen. She spoke, and on her face let fall her veil, and bowed her head, and sate with folded hands. But at the central hearth those women old, who while the mother spake and ceased with toil, began again to heat the sacred fire, and how to turn and left his mother's house, fen sailor, whose little windows looked to sea, and came again down into the roaring waves, and back along to beach to Asgard went, bounding on the retreat as it should be. But night came down, and darkest Asgard streets, when from the lowest feast the gods arose, and lighted torches, and took up the corpse, and brought it from the floor of Odin's hall, and laid it on a bier, and bare him home, through the fast darkened streets to his own house, Bellerberg, on whose column bore the grave, the enchantments that recall the dead to life. For wise he was, many curious arts, postured roots, and healing herbs he knew, unhappy, but with art he didn't know, to keep his own life safe and see the sun. Where to his hall the gods brought Balder home, and each bespaking him as he laid him down. Would that ourself, O Balder, we were born home to our halls, with Thorglod by our kind, so thou mightst live and still delight the gods. They spake, and each went home to his own house. But there was one, the first of all the gods, for speeded Hermund was his name in heaven. Most fleet he was, but now he went the last, having heart for Balder to his house, which he in Asgard built him, where to dwell against the harbour by the city wall. Him the blind Hoder meet as he came up from the sea cityward, and knew the steps, for yet could Hermund see his brother's face, for it grew dark, but Hoder's touched his arm, and as a spray of honeysuckle flowers brushed across a tired rabbit's face, or shuffled through the deep dew-moistened dust, and the May evening in the darkened lands, and starts him where the finger ghost went by. So Hoder brushed by Hermund's side and said, Take Slibers, Hermund, and set forth with dawn to Hellas' kingdom, to ask Balder back, and we shall be the guides who have the power. He spake and brushed soft by and disappeared, and Hermund gazed into the night and said, Who is it utters through the darkest haste, so quickly and will wait for no reply? Voice was like the unhappy Hoder's voice, or bide I will see and do his hest, or arrange no diving and with command. So speaking, the fleet-footed Hermund came home, and lay down to sleep in his own house, and all the gods lay down in their own house. And Hoder to come down, distraught with grief, loathing to meet at dawn the other gods. And he went in and shut the door, and fixed his sword upright, and fell on it, and died. But from the hill of Lixclef Odin rose, the throne from which his eyes served the world, and mountain snipers in the darkness rode to Asgard. And the stars came up in heaven, high over Asgard to light home the king. But fiercely Odin galloped moved in heart, and swift to Asgard the gate he came, and trebled the hoofs of Sleipnir's range along the flinty floor of Asgard streets. And the gods trembled on their golden beds, hearing the wrathful farmer coming home. For dread, for like a railing Odin came, and the Valhalla's gate he rode and left Sleipnir. And Sleipnir went to his own stall, and in Valhalla Odin laid him down. But in Breda Gnana, Balder's wife, came with a goddess who wrought her will, and stood round Balder lying on his bier, and at his head and feet she stationed skulls, whom their lives were famous for the song. They all the corpse intoned a plain-lived strain, and Dörfk and Narn and the trade replied, and find to a night where wailed were dire. But when their souls were satisfied with wail, they went and laid them down, and Nanna went into an upper chamber and lay down, and resealed the tired lids with sleep. And 'twas the night is boarding hard and drawn, and the airs chillest and the stars sunk low, when Balder strode for the gloomy, day and year, in air, in thrall, in future as he was, life and still raised around his head, and through his glorious mark in heaven, he stood over against the curtain of a bed, and gazed to Nanna as she slept, and spake. Poor lamb, thou sleepst and forgetst the way. Tears dances upon the lashes of thine eyes. Tears wipe the pillars by the cheek, but thou, like a young child, hast cried thyself to sleep. Sleep on thy watchery and thine ear to aid, and life I keep not far from thee, dear soul. Never do we neglect thee now, for dead. Of tomorrow's dawn the gods prepare to gather wood and build a funeral pile upon my ship, and burn my corpse with fire, with saints all honored by the dead, and we will think to burn it on the choicest 12. If me for most orders will come and right, but it shall not be so. But wild, but swiftly, but painful shall we drop from the free sea. Look at the fleet of life and thief of soul. We shall be burned the corpse of mine, not we. And well I know what by the stroke of death, tardy or swift, was maybe low to die. So it restored me, none to my sight, of who so well have laughed, but I can't smooth. The way it was as least my prayers away. Yes, and I fain would altogether weird, therefore the head and with the gods in heaven, for long life will not be my desire. But my past is not only the desire, yet really, nana, is the life I lead. In the dying world and hell's mounting roar, and the roof of the ghosts to troops of dead, whom I live with all not controlled besides, for the race of gods and no one rare. Save me alone at Hela, son the queen, and the noble sons of mortal men, and will have yet heaven you will death, and now, beast of Valhalla in my father's hall. And being glorious sort of a willow, we all the cowards and the regal were. Men spent their sickness, obscure decay, or even there, oh Nana, we might find solemn solace in each other's look and speech, wandering together for the gloomy world, and talking of a life we led in heaven, where we yet lived among the other gods. He spake and straighted, his lineaments began to fade, and Nana in his sleep stretched out, arms towards him with a cry, but he mournfully shook his head and disappeared. And as a woodman sees a little smoke hang in the air and fear to disappear, so water faded in the night away, and Nana on the bed sunk back. But in Freya, the mother of the gods, with stroke painless and swift, set free her airy soul, which took on Balder's track the way below, and instantly the second morn appeared. Journey to dead. Far from the east, up the ascent of heaven, they drove with course of a shipping main, and in Valhalla, from his gabled perch, the golden-crested cock began to crow. Hereafter, in the blackest dead of night, with shrill and dismal cries, the bird shall grow, warning the gods that foes draw nigh to heaven. But now he grew at dawn a cheerful note, to make the gods and heroes to their task. And all the gods and all the heroes woke, and from the beds the heroes rose and donned their arms, and led their horses from the stall, and mounted them, and in Valhalla's court we arranged, and when the day fray began. And all day long they were hacked and hewn, with dust and groans, and limbs lot off and blood. But out of night returns to Odin's hall, roundless and fresh, such lot is theirs in heaven. And the Valkyrs on their steeds went forth toward earth in fights of men, and at their sight Skolda, the youngest of the Nords, rode, and over Bifrost, where his Hymen's watch, past Midgard's fortress down to earth they come, where through some battlefields where men fell fast, where horses fetlock deep in blood, they ride and pick the bravest warriors out for dead, whom they bring back with them at night to heaven, to glad the gods and feast in Odin's hall. But the gods went not now as otherwhile into the Tiljard, where the heroes fought, to feast their eyes with looking on the fray, nor did they to their judgment place repair, by at Aish Edels in Edel's plain, where they hold counsel and give laws to men. But they went, Odin first, the rest behind, to the whole Gladhelm, which is built of gold, where all in circle ranged 12 golden chairs, and in the midst of high Odin's throne, he all the gods in silence sate them down, and thus the father of the ages spake. Go quickly, God, bring wood to the seashore, with all which is beseemed the dead to have, and make a funeral pile on board our ship. On the 12th day the gods should burn his corpse, with him out, though take snipers, and ride down to Hilda's kingdom to ask Balder back. So said he, and the gods arose and took axes and ropes, and at the head came Thor, shouldering his hammer with the giant's known. For winded way and drove with steeds before, and up the new mountain tracks they fared, to a dark forest in the early dawn, and up and down, and side and slant the roam, and from the glens of day an echo came, of crashing thorns, for which a hammer thrown smote with rocks within spears pines, and burst their roots, while to the tops the gods made fast the woven ropes, and held them back, and looped the boards, and clove them on the sword, and bound the logs behind their steeds to draw, and drove them homeward on the snorted steeds, went straining through the crackling brushwood down, and by the darkest forest paths the gods followed on their shoulders carried bows, and they come out upon the plain and paced Asgard, and lead the horses to the beach, and loosed them of their loads on the seashore, and ranged the wood and stacked by Balder's ship, and every god went home to his own house. But when God's were to the forest gone, Hermod lit Sleipers from Valhalla forth, and sailed him before that Sleipers broke. No mean hand with Odin's on his mane, on his broad back, no lesser right more. Yet that chill now he stood at Hermod's side, arching his neck and glad to be bestrode, knowing God we went to seek, how dear, would Hermod mountain him and saddle far, in silence, up the dark and shroud road, which branches from the north of heaven and went all day, and daylight went, and night come on, and all the night he rode and journeyed so, 9 days, 9 nights, towards the northern ice, through valleys deep and gloved by roaring streams, and on the 10th morn he beheld the bridge, which spans with golden arches Gillian stream, and on the bridge a damsel watching Arnold. In the straight passage at the farther end, the road issues between walling rocks, scant space with water left for passage by. But as when cowards in October drive, there came across a snowy mountain pass to winter posture on the southern side, and on the ridge a raven chokes the way, wedged in the snow, when painfully the hint, with God and shouting urge, the cattle passed, plunging through deep, untrodden banks of snow, to right and left, and warm steam fills the air. So on the bridge the damsel blocked the way, and questioned Hermod as he came and said, Woe, what woe on the black and fire horse, and whose hoofs the bridge of Giles stream rumbles and shakes? Tell me the race and how. But yester morn 5 troops of dead passed by, bound on the way below to Hellas realm, nor shocked the bridge so much as for alone, and though his flesh and colour on their checks, like a man who live and draw the vital air, nor looks for pale and wan, like man decased, souls beyond below, my daily passage here. And the fleet-footed Hermod answered her, O damsel, Hermod am I called the son of Odin, and my high roof's house is built. Far hence in Asgard, of the city of gods, and Sleipers, Odin's horse, is this I ride, and I come, send this road on Baldur's track. Say when, if we have crossed the bridge or no. He spake, the warder of the bridge replied, O Hermod, rarely do the feet of gods, or the horses of the gods resound upon my bridge, and when we cross, I know, all have gone this way and taken the road. Below where to the north, toward Hellas realm, from here a cold white mist can be discerned, not lit with sun, but through the darksome air, by the dim warble-blunted light of stars, which hangs over the ice, where lies the road. For in that ice are lost was northern streams, freezing and riding in the onward flow, which from the fountain doth Vergelmer run, springward bubbles up by Hellas throne, where are the joyless seats, the haunts of ghosts, Hellas pale swamps, and where whose boulder bold, right on, pass free, but he by this and where. She spake, and stepped aside, and left him room, and Hermod greeted her, and galloped by. Across the bridge, when she took post again, but northward Hermod rode, the way below, and o'er darksome tract, which knows no sun, but by the bloodied light of stars he fared. They came down to ocean's northern strand, and the drear ice beyond the giant's home, thence on the journey o'er the fields of ice, still north until he met a stretching wall, bearing his way, and in the wall a grate, when he dismounted and drew tight the girths, on the smooth ice of Sleipner, Odin's horse, and made him leap the grate, and came within, and he beheld spread round him Hellas realm, the plains of Niflheim, where ran the dead, and heard the thunder of the streams of hell, for near the walled river of rowing flows outmost. The others near the center run, the storm, the abyss, the howling and the pain, which flow by Hellas throne near their spring, and from the dark flocked up the shadowy tribes, and as the shallows crowd the bulrush beds of some clear river issuing from a lake. On autumn days before they cross the sea, into each blower's crest a swallow hangs, swinging, and others skim the river streams, and the quick twittering fills the bank and shores. So round Hermod swarmed the twittering ghosts, women and infants, and young men who died too soon for fame with white unriven shields, and old men known to glory, but were stare, betrayed them, and of wasting age they died. not once, yet dying way arm of war, and now have chief regard, Hellas below, when flocked wrangling up a piteous crew, creating of none, deserved and forlorn, cowards were enslaved and hurt alive, and round them still the wattled hurdles hung, wherewith they stamped them down and trod them deep, to hide their shameful memory from man, one only passed unhailed and reached the throne of Hela and Sonied borders crowned, and Hela sat throne with countenance stern, must bespeak him first, the solemn queen. On every home haste woe and dare to leave, the light and journey to the cheerless land, where ill flit about the feudal shades. How didst thou cross the bridge or Gillen stream, being alive and come to ocean shore, a hall up the great that bears the wall? She spake, but down of Spain's helmet sprang, and fell before her feet, and clasped her knees, and spake at might and turtle, and said, O Hela, wherefore should the gods declare their errands to each other of the ways we go? The rend and the way is known. Thou know'st the grief we have in heaven, for Balder, whom thou hold'st thy right below. Restore him, for what part fulfills he her? Surely she cheer of the cheerless seats, and touch the petty ghost of joy. Not for such end, O queen, thou hold'st while rely. For heaven was born, the city of gods and heroes, where we live in light and joy. For they restore him for his place in the air. He spoke, and grave replied the solemn queen, Arnold, with thou art the son of heaven, a strange unlike errand, sure is win. The gods sent to me to make them blessed. Small bliss my race have of the gods obtained. 3 mighty children to my father lock, that anger boat where giantess bring forth. Fenris the wolf, the serpent huge, and me. Of these the serpent in the seas ye cast, whose sins in your deepest heart are waxed a mine. And now with gleaming ring enfolds the world, me on this cheerless nether world ye threw, and gave me 9 unlighted realms to rule, while on this island in the lake afar, made fast for brown crag by Rhionid strength, subdued with limber chains, lives Fenris bound. Lock still subside in heaven, or fartherwise, your mate for loved and feast in Odin's hall. Or him to foes await in netted snares, and in a cave a bed of needle rocks, and o'er his visage serpents drop in gall. Yet he shall one day rise and burst his bones, with himself set as his offspring free, when he guides Muspel's children to the bourne. Till random pile, all in pain we live, lulled by the gods, and ask the gods our aid. Howbeit, we abide our day till when we do not, as some fable haters do, seek to afflict our foes with pretty pangs, helpless to better us or ruin them. Come when, if Balder was so dear beloved, and this is true, and such as lost in heavens, ye how to heaven may Balder be restored. Show me through all the world the signs of grief. Falls but one thing to grief, here Balder stops. Let all that lives and moves upon the earth weep him, and all that is without leave weep. Let gods, man, brutes between him, plants and stones. So shall I know the lost was dear indeed, and bend my heart and give him back to heaven. She spake, and Hamlet answered her and said, Hela, such as thou sayest, the term shall be, but come declare me this and truly tell. May I, ere I depart, but Balder hail, or is it here with hail to greet the dead? He spake, and straightway Hela answered him, Hermund, greet Balder, with a wild and hold, converse, his speech remains, though he be dead. And straight to Balder Hermund turned and spake, Even in the dope of death, O Balder, hail, or hearst if hearing like a speech is thin. The terms of a well meant hands to heaven, fear nothing but what all should be fulfilled. For not unmindful of thee are the gods, who see the light and blessed in Asgard dwell. Even ye they seek way out in Hellas realm, and sure of all the happiest far art thou, would ever have been known in earth or heaven, a life and word of God's, the most beloved, and now was sitting crowed by Hela's side, he and haste honor among all the dead. He spake, and Balder uttered him reply, but feeble as a voice far off, he said, Hermund the nimble, guilt me not my death. Better to live a slave, a captured man, who scatters rushes in the master's hall, when we are crowned king here, and rule the dead. And now I count not of these terms as safe, to be fulfilled, nor my return is sure. For I laughed, and many mourn by death. For double-minded ever was the seed of look, and double other gifts will give, howbeit report the message, and wherewith to Odin to my father take his wing. Memorial of me, whether safe or no, and tell the heaven-spawn gods over haste seen, me sitting here below by Hela's side, crowned, having honor among all the dead. He spake, and raised his hand, and gave a ring, and with inscrutable regard the queen of hell beheld them, and the ghosts stood dumb. But Hermund took the ring, and yet once more kneeled and did homage to the solemn queen. Then mounted snipers, and set forth to ride back through the astonished tribes of dead to heaven, and the rawly came and fought a great, lifted and issued on the fields of ice, and all the ice he fared to ocean's strand, and up from whence a wet and misty road, the armed damsels bright in Ginna's stream. Worse was the way to go and to return, for him, for others all returned is barred. 9 days he took to go to return, and on the 12th morn saw the light of heaven, and as a traveller in the early dawn to the steep edge of some great valley comes, through which a river flows and cease banneth. Clouds of white rolling vapors fill the vale, but o'er them on the farther slope describes vineyards and crofts, and pastures bring with sun. So Hermund of a fog between saw heaven, and Sleipnir snorted, for he smelled the air of heaven, and mightily as winged he flew. And Hermund saw towers of Asgard rise, and he drew near, but heard no living voice. And Asgard and the golden halls were dumb, when Hermund knew what labor held the gods. And through the empty streets he rode and paced, and the gatehouse to the sands and found the gods on the seashore by Balder's ship. Funeral. The gods held talk together, grouped in knots, round Balder's corpse, which they had thither borne, and Hermund came down towards them from the gate. And Lok, the father of the serpent first, beheld him come into his neighbour's beak. See, he is Hermund, who comes single back from hell. Shall I tell thee how he seems? Like as a farmer who hath lost his dog, some morn at market in a crowded town. From in the streets the poor beast runs in vain, and follows his man afterward for hours, and late at evening spent in painting, falls before strangers wherefore not his home. The flanks a tremble, and a slender tongue hangs quivering out between his dust-smeared jaws, and piteously he eyes the passers by. But how his master comes to his own farm, far in the country, wondering where he is, so Hermund comes today unfollowed home. And straight his neighbour, moved with rapt, replied, The sire found forward faults in heart, and a mocker whom, for God, we hate. Peace, lest our father Odin here forgives, would I might see him snatch thee in his hand, and bind the carcass like a bale with cords, and hurl thee in a lake to sink or swim, if clear from Portling Balder's dead to swim, but he before devised it to throw, and perish against fate before the day. So they two loved to one another spake, but Odin looked toward the land and saw his messenger, and he stood forth and cried. And Hermund came and leapt from Sleipnir down, and in his father's hand put Sleipnir's rein, and greeting Odin and the gods, and said, Odin, my father, and ye, gods of heaven, lo, home, having performed your will, I come into a joyless kingdom ever been. Below looked upon the shadowy tribes of ghosts, and commanded from the lonely queen. And to your prayers she sends you this reply. Show you through all the world the sign of grief. Fate's but one thing to grieve, where border stops. Let God's man, brutes, we reap him, plants and stones. So shall she know your loss was dear indeed, and bend her heart and give you boulder back. He spoke, and all the gods only looked, and straight the Father of the ages said, Yes, gods, these terms may keep another day, but now put on your arms and mount your steeds, and in progression all come near and weep. Waller, who wedded what the dead desire, when ye enough have wept, then build a pile of hacked wood and burn his corpse with fire out of our sight, that he may turn from grief and lead, as erst our day life in heaven. He spoke when the gods had met and only dawned, his dazzling corselet and his helm of gold, and led the way on Sleipner, and the rest followed in tears, their father and their king, and threes in arms around the dead they rode, weeping, their sands were wetted, and their arms with their thick falling tears, so could a friend. They mourned the day, so bright, so loved the god, and Odin came and laid his kindly hands on Balder's breast, and thus began the wail. Farewell, O Balder, bright and loved my son, in that great day, the twilight of the gods, when most the children shall be lower heaven, when we shall miss the counsel and the war. Thou comes near to the next, a warrior tall, shouldering the hammer and the chariot drawn, sawing the long-haired goats with silvered rein, and over Balder's corpse these words didst say, Brother, what dwellst in the darksome land, and talks with the fiercest tribes of ghosts. Not I know not how we prize thee there, but here I know or will be missed and mourned, for horned spirits and high wraths of wrath among the gods and heroes here in heaven, as among those whose joy and work is war, and daily strifes arise in angry words. But from my lips, O Balder, like the day, hear no one ever an injurious word to god or hero, but thou keepest back the others labouring to compose their broads. Be even kind, as Balder who was kind, for we lose him who smoothed all strife in heaven. He spake, and all the gods a sighing wailed, and Freya next came nigh with golden tears, the loveliest goddess she in heaven, but all most honoured after Freya, Odin's wife. Long ago the wandering Odin took to mate, but left her to roam in distant lands. Since when she seeks him and weeps tears of gold, names half she many, when days on earth they call her. Freya is her name in heaven, she in her hands Balder's head and spake, Balder, my brother, thou art gone around, unknown and long and happily on that way. My long lost wandering Oder, thou haste me, for the paths of heaven he is not found. If it be so, tell him what more word to his neglected wife, and what he is, and wringing his heart with shame to hear the word. For he, my husband, left me here to pine, no longer wife, when his unique heart was drove him from me into distant lands. Since when I vainly seek him through the world, and weep from shore to shore my golden tears. But neither God nor mortal heeds my pain, oh only Balder whereat for every kind. To take my hand and read my tears and say, Weep no, O Freya, weep no golden tears. One day the wandering Oder will return, or woe will find him in the fateful search, on some great road, or resting in an inn, or at a fort, or sleeping by a tree. So Balder said, but Oder will I know, but told Oder I should see no more. To the world's end, and Balder was gone, and I am left uncomforted in heaven. She spake, and all the goddess bewrayed. Last from among her heroes one came near, no god, but of a hero troop the chief, Ragnar, who swept the northern sea with fleets, and ruled o'er Denmark and the Heavy Islands, living, but I captured him and slew. The king whose fame and failed the waste of heaven, no time obscured it, and means later deaths. He last approached the corpse and spake, and said, Balder, where yet are many scales in heaven, still left at the chief's guild their brother break, whom we may buy to sing, O thou art gone. And always gladly, while we drink, we hear, after the feast is done in Odin's hall, but we harp every one string and rake, remembrance in our soul of wars alone. Such as on earth we valiant have worked, and blood and ringing blows to no violent death. But when thou sangest, Balder, O did strike, and ever outward like a bird in spring. The voice of giants minded us in youth, in wife and children, in our innocent home. Yes, and I too remembered when no more my dungeon with the serpents stung me dead, Loch Ella's victory on the English coast. But I heard Trower, sloth in Gotland Isle, and saw my shepherdess as Loch's glint, a flock along the wide onward beach, tears started to mine eyes with yearning yawn. Wherefore with grateful heart I mourn we deed. So can I spake, and our heroes groaned, but now sunlight paced the height of heaven, and soon had all the day been spent in wail. But when the father of the Aegis said, Yea, God, where will may be too much of way, bring now a gabard hood to board a ship. He brought the deck of locks and bade reply. But when the gods and heroes feared, they brought the wood to board a ship and built a pile. For the deck breathed and loftily, when the corpse of board on the highest top they lay, with Nada on his right and on his left, Hoda his brother, whom his own hand slew, and raised a glass of wine and oil to lean against the bodies, and stuck torches near, splinters of pine wood soaked with turpentine, and brought his arms and gold and all his stuff, and slew the dogs with all his table feet, and his horse brought his horse, whom most he loved, and threw them on the plain and only threw, last choice, give Pharaoh his golden ring. They fixed the mast and hoisted up the sails, but they put fire to the wood, and Thor set his stout shoulder hard against the stern, to push the ship through the thick sand. Sparks flew from the deep trench she plowed, so strong a god through it, and water gurgled in, and the ship floated on the waves and rocked. But in the hills a strong east wind arose, and came down moaning to the sea. First squalls ran black over sea's face, when steam rushed, the breeze and filled the sails and blew the fire, and wreathed in smoke the ship stood out to sea. Soon with a roaring rose the mighty fire, and the pile crackled, and between the rocks sharp criming tongues of flame shot out and leaped, curling and darting higher until they licked the summit of the pile, the dead, the mast, and ate the showing sails. But still the ship drove on, ablaze above the hull with fire, and the gods stood upon the beach and gazed. And while they gazed, the sun went lowy down, and the smoke-wrapped sea night come on. And the wind fell with night, and there was calm. But through the dark they watched the burning ship, still carried over the distant waters on, farther and farther, like an eye of fire. And as in the dark night a travelling man, bovis in the forest my veils, sees suddenly a spire of fire shoot out, and out of a black raised forest far below, which woodcutters have lighted near their lodge, against the whiffs and all night long it fares. So fled in the far darkness water's pyre, but fainter as the star rose high, it burned. Bodies were consumed ash and shocked the pyre, and as in a decaying winter fire, a shard log failing makes a shower of sparks. So with a shower of sparks the pile fell and rid-ring the sea around, and all was dark. But the gods went by starlight up the shore to Asgard, and sate down in Odin's hall. The table and the funeral feast began. All night they ate the boar salmon flesh, and from their horns with silver rimmed drink meat, silent and waited for the second morn. And morning over all the world was spread, when from their lowest feast the gods arose, and took their horses, and set forth to ride over a rich bifrost, where, as Heimdall's watched, to the ash Yggdrasil in Ida's plain. Thor came on foot to rest on horseback road, and we found Mjolnir sitting by the fount of wisdom, where Benefit ash trees sprigs, and saw the Nornies watering the roots, for the world-shadowing tree with honeydew. Where came the gods, and sate them down on stones, and was the father of the Aegis said, Ye gods, the terms ye know with Hermod brought, accept them or reject them, both have groans, accept them and the binders unfulfilled, to leave for ever born in the grave, and unrecovered prisoner shaped with shades. But how ye say, should the fulminant fail, smooth sound the terms, and let me fulfilled, for the beloved was born while he lived, and heaven and earth, and who would grudge him tears? But from the traitorous seed of Loki came these terms, and I suspect some hidden front. Bethink ye, God, is winner of a way? Speak we not with the way to the gods. If Odin, clad in radiant arms, mounted on Sleipnir, warrior Thor, and rode on his car beside me, and my sons, all the strong brood of heaven, to smell my train, should make interrupting into hellish alarm, and set the fields of gloom ablaze with light, and bring a tree of Balder back to heaven? He spake, and his fierce sounds applauded loud. But Freya, mother of the gods, arose, daughter and wife of Odin. Thus she said: Odin, warrior friend, what a threat is with! You threatenest what your scans, why might even thin, for of all powers the mightiest far foe, that of a man on earth and gods in heaven, and even from thee thyself hath been withheld. One thing to undo which always self hast ruled, for all which hath been fixed was fixed by thee. In the beginning, ere the gods were born, before the heavens were built, thou didst slay the giant Ymir, whom the abyss brought forth. Thou and thy braven fires, the sons of Bor, and threwest trunk to choke the dismal void. But of his flesh and members thou didst build the earth and ocean, and above them heaven. And from the flaming world where must be remains was sensed and fledged fire and menace lights, sun, moon, and stars, which thou hast hung in heaven, diving clear the paths of night and day. And Asgard thou didst build and Midgard ford, when we were midst of us who gods were born. When walking by the sea, foundest spar of wood, and framest man, who till the earth on the sea were fields of pirates sail. And all the race of Jörm thou didst drown, save one Bergemer, he on shipboard fleet, with a look, and from him the giants sprang. But of a brothel face we moved forth, and set by the ocean's uttermost march to dwell, but Hela into Nilfheim thou flewst, and gavest to nine enlightened words to rule, a queen, an empire over all the dead. An empire will thou nor invade light up, the darkness from a grasp of subject here. Try it, but I, for one, will not applaud, nor I do merit. Odin, thou shouldst light me no words, for thou be first in heaven, for I too am a goddess born of thee, thine elder and of my gods are sprung, and all when I do come I now but lock in my own breast, and have to none revered. Come in, since hell holds my right her prey, but as was terms to his release to heaven, accept the charge. Thou canst no more obtain, sent through the world by messengers, and treat all living and unliving things to weep, for Balder and for happily was smeared. Hela and Windmere laughed from back to heaven. She spake, and on her face let fall her veil, and bowed her head, and said with folded hands. Now did the all-running Odin slide a word. Straightway he spake, and thus addressed the gods. Gockishly fall through all the world and pray, all living and unliving things to weep. Balder, if haply he may thus be won. When the gods heard, they straight arose, and took wind horses, and rode forth through all the world. North, south, east, west they struck, and round the world, entering all things to be Balder's death. And all that lived, and all what lived, wept. And as in winter when the frost breaks up, and winter's end before the springs begin, and the warm west wind blows, and foe sets in, after an hour a dripping sound is heard, and all the forest and the soft streams snow, and the trees is dibbling thick with howls, and from the forwards the snow loads shuffle down, and in fields looking to the soft dark plots of grass peep off at night surrounding snow, and wind and the peasant heart is glad. So through the world was heard a dripping noise of all things weeping to bring Balder back, and there fell joy upon the gods to hear. But Hermund rode with Nerod, whom he took to show him spits and beaches of the sea, far off where some unwon might fail to weep, nigh the king of storms, who fishes snow. Not born in heaven, he was in Vanheim reed, with man, but lives a hostage with the gods. He knows each frith and every rooky creek, freight with dark pines and sands, with seafood streams. We two circled each coast, and all things wept, and rode home together through the wood of Janet, which to east of Midgard lies, bounding the giants, where the trees are iron. Where the wood before cave came, where sate in the cave's mouth a skinny hag, toothless and old. Ships the passers-by took it, she called, but no look were her shape. She greeted them the first, and laughed, and said, Ye God and good luck, is it so dull in heaven? With ye come pleasuring with hawk's eye wood. Loves of chains we are, first your spirits, look as in Sabo's yard, the sweetest birthed cow. whose manger is stuffed full of good fresh hay, snuffs at it daintily, and stoops her head to chew the straw a little at her feet, so he grows squeamish gods and sniff at heaven. She spake, but Hammond answered her and said, Talk not for gifts, me gums, we come to for tears, Balder is dead, and Hela holds her prey. But we restore if all things give him tears, which root not fine to all was Balder dear. But with a louder laugh the hag replied, Is Balder dead, and do you come for tears? Fuck with dry eyes will reap our waters prior, reap him all our things if reap they will, and rip him not, let Hela keep her prey. She spake, and to the caverns deep she fled, mocking, and Hammond knew that toil was vain, and there's suffering men who longer fraud, and the grey deep for gain, at least come home, and towards evening see the heralds rise of our own country, and clear descry a fire of rivered firs, with boys have lit upon the cliffs, or smoke of burning weeds out of a tiled field island. When the wind catches them and drives out again the sea, and we go long days tossing up and down of the grey sea ridge, and the glimpse of part we had made bitter for our toil, so God's cross was bitter for our joy. When it hard, when the word Hammond spake, It is the accuser Log who flowed us on, right deck and tell in heaven with heavy news, I must again below to Hela's alarm. He spoke and neared set far back to heaven, but northward Hammond rode the way below, the way he knew, and traversed giant stream, and down to ocean grouped and crossed the ice, and came men of a wall, and found the great, still lifted, where was his return for now. And once more Hammond saw around him spread the joyous plains, and heard the streams of hell. But as he entered on the extremest bound of Nilheim, he saw one ghost came near, hurrying and stopping off, as if afraid. Who there were unhappy whom his own hand slew, and Hammond looked and knew his brother's ghost, and called him by his name, and sternly said, How lay fate did blind and hardened eyes, my troth foe to plunge we in the gulp of a deep inner gloom, but fit is here, in twilight, on the lonely verge of hell, far from the ever ghost and Hela's throne, the doped lips for fears to meet Balder's voice, my brother, whom through fully thou didst slay. He spoke, but Hela answered him and said, Hammond, the nimble, does thou still purse? Be unhappy with reproach even in the grave. For this I died and flew beneath the gloom, nor daily to do abhorring gods, nor with a hateful presence cumber heaven, and canst thou not even here pass piting by, no less and all have I lost the light of heaven, in communion with my kin. I too had once a wife and once a child, and substance and a golden house in heaven, but all I left of my own act and fleet below, and those who hate me even here. Balder upbraids me not, nor hates at all, for he has cause, if any cause. But he, when red with downcast looks Hera came, stretched forth his hand, and with bending voice, Welcome, he said, if I be welcome here, brother and fellow sport of log with me. And not to offend thee, Hammond, not to force my hate to converse on thee, came I up from the deep gloom, where I will no return. But earnest I long to hover near, not too far off when thou camest by, to feel the presence of a brother God, and hear the passage of a horse of heaven, for the last time, for here thou comest no more. He spake and turned to go to the inner gloom, but Hermon stayed him with mild words, and said, Though those who wait to chide me hold are blind, truly thou said, the planning guilt mind was loose, the unwitting hand alone was thin. But God alike the sons of men with, when they have foe, will blame the nearest cause. Howbeit stay and be appeased, and tell sets Balder still pomp by Hela's side. Who is he mingled with the unnumbered dead? And the blind holder answered him and spake, His place of state remains by Hela's side, but empty. Was wife, for Nanna came lady below, and joined him. And the pair frequent the still recrescent of a realm of Hela, and hold converse undisturbed. But they two doubtless will have briefed the palm, which floats before visiting from heaven, and have drawn upwards to his verge of hell. He spake, and as he keised the puff of wind rode heavily the leading mist aside, round where they stood, and we beheld two forms make towards them over the drenching cloudy plain, and Hermann straight perceived them who they were. Border and Nana to Border said, Border, to truly for was the snare, look triumph still, and let her keep the prey. No more to Asgard shall we come, no lodge, in my own house, bride up black, no joy. No love of beer towards thee, no train up forest, thy son, to be loved like thee. Here must thou lie, and wait an endless age, wherefore for the last time, O Border, hail. He spake, and Balder answered him and said, Hail, father, for here thou comest no more, yet mourn not for me, Arnold, who was sitting in heaven, nor let the other gods lament. As wholly to be pitied, quite forlorn, for none have rejoined me, who, of all in heaven, was seldom parted from my sight, and still the acceptance follows me with shroud. Before my life and cheers me even here, the iron throne of hell is relaxed, when I draw night, and the round tribes of dead trust me and gladly bring for my award their ineffectual foids and feeble hates, shadows of hates, where they distress them all. And the fleet-footed Hermann made reply, Why is done all the solace death allows this team and function, and so far as well. Yet here thou liest, born the underground, rusting forever, and the years roll on, the generations pass, the ages grow, and bring us near to the final day, when from the south-shouldered march the fire band, and cross the bridge of heaven with log for guide, and from this it is here with broken chain, while from the east the giant Reimer steers his ship, and the great serpent makes to land, and all are marched in one flaming square against the gods upon the plains of heaven, and mourn thee, but thou canst not help us when. He spake, but Balder answered him and said, Mourn not for me, mourn Hermann for the gods, mourn for the men on earth, the gods in heaven, who live, and with our eyes shall see when day will come when Asgard's tower shall fall, and Odin the sons the seeds of Golden. But order where I to save them in an hour, I strength could save them, could not Odin save my father, this bright warrior Thor. Vidar the silent, the impetuous child, I would these cannot avail, yet doubtless when the day of battle comes, and the two hosts are marshalled, and in heaven the golden crescent cook shall sound alarm, and his black-brother bird, from hence reply, and bucklers clash, and sprees begin to pour. Long with steel within my breast fought vain, but not to me so grievous as I know. To other gods is where I am enforced, absence from fields where I could nothing aid, and I am long since wearing of your storm of carnage, and find, hammered in your life, something too much of war and broils, which makes life one perpetual fight, a bath of blood. Mine eyes are dizzy with the arrowy hail, mine ears are stunned with bows and stick for calm. Inactive, therefore, let me lie in gloom, and red inglorious I tend the course of ages, and my name return to lie. In times as aliens to a spirit mild, in new recovered seats, the happier day. He spake, and the fleet Hermann thus replied, Brother, what see thou wees? What happier day? Tell me where my pounder when gone. And a ray-crowned boulder answered him, For the south beyond the blue, where spreads another heaven, the boundless, no one yet hath reached it, where hereafter shall arise the second Asgard with another name, Finvar, when all this present earth and heavens, but times of a latter day, have swooned. And we from sight have disappeared and sunk, shall all small remain of the gods repair, how then I shall join them from the grave, where reassembling we shall see emerge. From a bright ocean at our feet on earth, more fresh, more verdant, and the last the fruits. Self-springing, and the seed of man preserved, who shall live in peace, as now in war. But we in heaven shall find again with joy the ruined places of Odin, seats familiar, halls where we have suppered of old, we enter them with wonder. Never fill our eyes with facing into a build with tears, and we shall treat once more the well-known plain of Ida, and among the rest shall find the golden dice with which we played of yore, and we will bring to mind the former life, and passed them over gods the wise discourses of Odin. We delight of our days, of hermit brave of host, may he join us when. Such for the future is my hope. Meanwhile, I was the fall of hell and endure death, for gloom which round me even now thickens, and to its inner glove records farewell, for longer speech is not allowed. He spoke and waved farewell and gave his hand to Nana, and she gave her brother blind her hand, in turn for guidance, and the three departed over the cloud of pain, and soon faded from sight into the interior gloom. But Hammond stood beside his drowning horse, mute, gazing after them in tears and fain. Vain had he followed where recent steps, thought way to death were bound, and he to heaven, when but a power he could not break with head, and as a stork with idle boys have trapped, and tied him in a yard at autumn seas, the locks of his kind passed flying o'er his head, to warmer lands and coast, where keep the sun. He strains to join the flight, and from his sheet follows them with a long complaining cry. So Hermit gazed, and yearned to join his kin. At last he sighed, and set forth back to heaven.